Number 15 does not have a line reference, so that means that we should skip ahead to number 16 and see if it gives us some line references so we can narrow our focus. And sure enough, 16 is a part of an evidence pair, and so we now know that 15 and 16 are going to go together, and we're going to use the line references in 16 to answer 15. Multi-part question, big pain in the neck, but it's just what we have to do. Now, the other thing I kind of notice about 16 is I've got line references all over this passage, right? 8 to 14 is at the beginning, 64 to 67 is at the end. That's a lot of range, and because of the chronology rule, it's unlikely that we'd be jumping all over the passage. Now, that probably means 8 to 14 isn't right because we've seen the answers to other questions kind of come after that, but I don't know, there's a lot on that first paragraph, so maybe it is okay. And the same thing with 64 to 67. That seems very far out of where we are right now, but question 17 doesn't have a line reference, but question 18 does, and it's 72. So that follows the chronology rule. So this doesn't really help us that much here. We're going to need to kind of just plow through these choices, but let's be methodical. Let's use the QLC method to stay organized. So first, we read the question in 15. Let's make sure we understand what we're looking for. Based on the passage, how would the author most likely characterize many attempts to improve traffic? Okay, I know what I'm looking for. Now I go down to the line references in number 16, and I'm going to read these, and I'm going to look for anything that talks about improving traffic, what people attempt, and most importantly, what the author might think of that. All right, so we want the author's perspective. So let's look at 8 to 14. Okay, that's right here. That means that a new transit system has to be backed up by something that impels complementary reductions in car use, say the physical elimination of traffic lanes or the conversion of existing roadways into bike or bus lanes, ideally in combination with higher fuel taxes, parking fees, and tolls. Well, I barely understand what they're saying, but I don't think they're giving the author's kind of opinion here. I don't really think they're talking about how we would characterize the attempts to improve traffic. This feels kind of random to me, so I would feel pretty comfortable excluding this choice. Let's keep going. 22 to 26. That's right here. That tolerance has grown in recent decades, and not just in the United States, but it isn't unlimited, and even people who don't seem to mind spending half their day in a car eventually reach a point where finally enough is enough. So I guess maybe they're talking about improving traffic, tolerance of commuters for long, annoying commutes, and that tolerance has gone down. So this is a case where I might be like, okay, I don't necessarily understand 100% what they're talking about, but he's talking about tolerance, and maybe tolerance is down. Okay, let's leave it. 31 to 40. 31 to 40. Oof, that's a long line reference. That's going to be all the way over to here. So C and C. If, in a misguided effort to do something of environmental value, municipalities take steps that make long-distance car commuting faster or more convenient by adding lanes, building bypasses, employing traffic control measures that make it possible for existing roads to accommodate more cars with fewer delays, replacing toll booths with radio-based systems that don't require drivers even to slow down, we actually make the sprawl problem worse by indirectly encouraging people to live still farther from their jobs, stores, schools, and doctors' offices. Oh my God, the sentence even goes on further, but no, technically it ended at 40. So, worse. That's where it ends. So here's the thing. That's a long sentence, hard to understand, but what do I understand of it? Well, they do talk about many attempts to improve traffic. I mean, gosh, half of the lines are just a list of examples of ways that they tried to improve traffic. So that part seems to match with the question. And do they say what the author thinks about those ways? Yes, that's what I underlined right at the beginning. I noticed the author was giving his opinion. He's saying it's misguided. That's the author's point of view. They said that right out front. So here's another case where I might just jot this down that he thinks it's misguided, and that choice is now my favorite. B maybe, but C seems to hit more of my checkboxes. Let's look at D, though, just to play it safe, 64 to 67. That's all the way down here. Moving drivers out of cars and into other forms of transportation can have the same effect if existing traffic lanes are kept in service. Road space begets road use. So here he is giving a way of improving traffic, I guess. But he's not really saying whether this is good or bad. I would really love to have more of an opinion sentence than this one. This just seems to be talking about a potential solution. So that doesn't really jump out to me. Again, I could keep it, see if maybe a choice in 15 matches with it, but let's make sure, let's stick with our favorite and see if we can find a match there first. And so now we go to the C part of the QLC method, which is we look at the choices for 15 and we try to see if anything matches the line references that we were sorting through before. They are doomed to fail because most people like driving too much to change their habits. Well, it did talk about people driving, I guess, but from an SAT perspective, doomed to fail and most people are very strong phrases. I don't remember him saying anything that strong. Misguided is very different than doomed to fail. Plus, most people require some evidence. We would need evidence that most people, in fact, do like driving too much. Just not enough to say some people. It's different. So that choice, for a lot of reasons, doesn't seem to match with what I've read. B, they overestimate how tolerant people are of long commutes. Okay, well, that matches my tolerance choice, right? So people are not tolerant. That seems to match. Well, let's go back to line reference B and see what that's saying. It's saying that tolerance of commutes has grown in the recent decades, and not just in the United States, but it isn't unlimited, and even people who don't seem to mind spending half their day in a car eventually reach a point where finally enough is enough. So it does talk about tolerance, and it does seem to say that people are overestimating what they're talking about, but I'm getting a much more mixed vibe from this line reference now than I did before. It's saying that they do have a high tolerance, but there's a limit to that tolerance. So it's kind of mixed. Whereas this is much more negative, right? They overestimate how tolerant people are of long commutes. So, yeah, maybe, but improving traffic has got all sorts of other ways that they talk about doing it. It's not just about the length of the commute. So this is a little bit too narrow for my liking. Let's look at C. They are well-intentioned but ultimately lead to environmental harm. So if we go back to line reference C, in a misguided effort to do something of environmental value positive, municipalities take steps that make long-distance car commuting faster or more convenient. So they are well-intentioned, they're valuable, but they ultimately lead to environmental harm because if we skip ahead, we actually make the sprawl problem worse. And the sprawl is what he says is what causes the harm. So that to me does match with my line reference C. I'm going to read D anyway, but the fact that line reference C was my favorite before makes me more confident in choice C now. Even though those B's match, I feel like line reference C is better at answering this initial question. Let's look at D though. They will only work if they make driving more economical and productive. Well, they're not really talking about the economics, and what does it mean for driving to be productive? That doesn't make sense to me. So really we are between two kind of pairs of answers here. The two C's, which I am going to pick, and just to clarify, the two B's also happen to be a little bit of a match. And so this gets to why the QLC method is so important for evidence pairs. We need three things to line up. Yes, we need the line reference to support the answer choice that we pick. And I think I've got two cases where that happens, right? The green C's and the blue B's support each other. But there's a third thing that needs to be in alignment when we have these evidence pairs, and that's the initial question. We need to make sure that our pair of answers actually answers the initial question. That's why it's QLC. Three things need to be in alignment. And so C and C do that better, because it's very clear to me that we're getting the author's opinion in those lines. They are definitely listing many attempts to improve traffic, right? There were several things listed, whereas line reference B only had like maybe one thing, the commute length. And we're getting that characterization of well, what is that? Is it positive or is it negative, right? So it's well-intentioned, but ultimately harmful. So this is hard, but I don't think I'd be able to get this if I wasn't being methodical and kind of going through these choices with a process, the QLC method. It's frustrating to have to spend so much time on one pair of questions. However, this doesn't happen often on a test. You'll only have a handful that are this intense. And so if you use the no reading strategy to save time and narrow your focus to the lines just that you are asked to read, you will save time to be able to do this deep dive on questions that are hard. And if you don't have the time, fine. Pick whatever comes first and then move on and get the points on all the easier stuff. It's fine if you're losing a couple hard questions if it means getting everything else right. So it's all about just using your time effectively. This is a hard one. There is just no doubt about it. That's okay. You're going to hit some hard ones.